So this is the next video I'm going to do for the Who Said It Better playlist. So we'll call this Who Said It Better Part 2, I guess. But I'm entitling it Jesus slash Titus slash Dove slash Jonah. So Titus, as we've covered in the introduction, Titus Flavius was the son of Vespasian. Both of them were Roman generals, and it was Titus who breached the walls of Jerusalem after laying siege to it for quite some time, and then eventually destroyed the temple in Jerusalem. So, and this in 70 CE or 70 AD, whatever you prefer, I guess. So in the first century, the very same century in which Jesus is supposed to have lived, and the same century in which the Christian Gospels were supposed to have been written. So we've already shown from the book Our Italian Surnames by Joseph Guerin Fucilla, Fucilla, that here it is given the meaning of the name Titus, or Titos in Greek. Titus is the way we typically pronounce it. The meaning given is dove, just as the meaning for Gaius is magpie, the meaning for Gallus is rooster, and these are all Latin Roman names. So, but, let's get some other opinions. And this is where the Strong's Concordance and the various lexicons can falter. It's usually when you begin turning over some rocks and you expect to find something underneath the rock, but then what you find is kind of something lacking in what should be a pretty reliable resource. And here, when we look up the name Titos in Greek from the Christian scriptures, it gives us the meaning nurse. Now, does that sound right to you? Does it sound right that a Roman general was named nurse? In the Strong's definition, it says, of Latin origin, but uncertain significance. So all of a sudden, they don't know what they're talking about. And this happens with some other connections to the Roman Flavian dynasty. So, yeah, the Blue Letter Bible is not really helping us much there, whereas typically it's a pretty powerful resource. But that's because it's relying on resources that seem to be faltering, whereas typically they're pretty helpful. So you have to wonder why they're faltering. So not a lot of help there. We do see, though, that strangely, in the Christian scriptures, which we are told come from this Hebraic Messianic sect that later became known as Christians, right? But we've got these Pauline epistles, and this person by the name of Titus figures pretty prominently there. But we'll get back to that. Because I'm not basing much of a case on that, except the fact that it's kind of strange that you have a Pauline epistle named Titus. So like one of the books of the Christian scriptures is named after the very man that destroyed the temple. So do you believe that's a coincidence? You know, out of all the names that existed in the Roman Empire, it's just a coincidence that one of the epistles of the Christian scriptures is named after the very man who destroyed the temple. So relying on our Italian surnames, but well, first let's check out some other possible meanings of Titus, because you know we don't want to maybe base our entire case on one book, but I will show you that the evidence for Titus meaning dove, aside from the fact that it's a what do you call it? Is it onomatopoeia? How's that word go? Onomatopoeia. Is that it? I always have the formation of a word from a sound associated with what it is named. So, like Titus, that kind of sounds like Twitter, right? The Twitter of doves. So maybe Titus is like based on the sound that a dove makes. I don't know. Anyway, let's look at some other opinions here. If you were living in ancient Rome, chances are you'd know someone named Titus, a popular boy's name. So now they're saying that this was a pretty common name in ancient Rome. Deriving from the Latin titulus, meaning title of honor, Titus was the name of a Roman emperor in the 1st century and the main character in the Shakespeare play Titus Andronicus. So then someone asks, is Titus a Greek or Roman name? Well, we see that it can be a Greek name, but here it says matter-of-factly that it's a Roman name. So that would mean that if, we're to rely on this, that would mean that the Titus mentioned in the Christian Greek scriptures is actually a Roman name, at least, a Roman name. I don't know if that necessarily means that the person is Roman, but it says Titus is a Roman praenomen. I assume that means proper name or primary name or given name, which is of unknown meaning. So here again, they just don't seem to know what it means. Possibly related to the Latin titulus, title of honor. It is more likely of Oscan origin, since it was borne by the legendary Sabine or Sabina king Titus Tatius, or Tatius maybe, I don't know. So what nationality is the name Titus? German, English, and Welsh, from the personal name from Latin, Titus. Well, thank you for getting to the bottom of it. Probably Etruscan in origin. And then it just goes into Christian background, having to do with the companion of Paul, disciple of Paul, in the Pauline epistles. What does the biblical name Titus mean? Titus was Paul's spiritual son, left on the island of Crete to get the church into the right order and structure. Yeah, well, that's what Titus Flavius did, certainly. In the Bible, Titus means pleasing, go, or to honor. None of which really strongly rings true when you're naming your son after yourself and your name means pleasing. I mean, maybe to honor. So let's see, what does the biblical name Titus mean? What does Titus mean in Latin? Etymology borrowed from Latin Titus, a Roman and Sabine praenomen meaning either honorable or strong, semicolon, of the giants. Now that's interesting. So, is Titus a white name? Wow. So what does Titus mean in Greek? Origin of Titus. Some believe it to be from the Greek tio, to honor. And then, does Titus mean fire? I wonder where that question came from, what the source of that is. But it says Titus, meaning to burn in Latin, which is extremely fitting for Titus Flavius, because he's the one who burned down the temple. Says the name Titus is of Latin origin, not Hebrew, and it is believed to have been derived from the Latin word titos, which means title of honor. So, what is the Latin name for fire? So then, there's some other questions here. What name means God of fire? Agni. So, those are some other opinions. But what we're looking for is there any weight to the possibility that Titus means dove, as this reference, which really seems to know what it's talking about, asserts. So we can close this, and here we have the Greek peristera, of uncertain derivation. It means a pigeon or a dove, and it's translated variously as either dove or pigeon in the Christian scriptures. Now, here's a key passage, Matthew chapter 3. Now, this is, of course, very early in the Christian scriptures. And it says, and this is also funny. This is, as Caesar's Messiah asserts that, and I don't know if it says it outright, but I know that Joseph Atwill has said it, that the Christian scriptures are filled with Roman black comedy, like very dark humor. And here's one of them. Then Jesus, or Titus, came from Galilee to the Jordan to John to be baptized by him. Now, John was one of the resistance fighters, possibly or controlled opposition, possibly controlled by Rome somehow. You know, we don't know. That's going to be shrouded, you know, with John's death. I don't know if we can ever truly uncover whether the resistance fighter John really worked for Rome or not. But anyway, I'm not sure that it really matters, because no one's basing a religion on the resistance fighter John. There are people who base their religion on the Apostle John, not seeing any connection between the Apostle John and the resistance fighter John, even though the end of the Gospel of John demonstrates that it is dependent on Flavius Josephus's the Wars of the Jews, which describes the resistance fighters Simon and John. So, anyway, so Titus came from Galilee to Jordan to John to be baptized by him. And then John says, I have need to be baptized by you, and you come to me. And then Titus answers him, let it be so now, for thus it is fitting for us to fulfill all righteousness. And then John acquiesced. And when Titus was baptized, he went up immediately from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove, and alighting on him. So here's this mysterious thing where, everybody always says, well, the dove is a symbol of peace. There's not really any really good explanation for why a dove was needed at this moment, given that, symbols of animals have to do with idol worship. But it becomes clear when we know who sponsored this literature. And look, a voice from heaven saying, this is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. So this is Vespasian saying this, the dove, because dove is the very last proper, or the very last noun mentioned. This, the dove, is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Dove is Titus. This, Titus, is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. And it's showing that Jesus is Titus. That's why the dove was necessary, because the dove is a code name, literal translation of the name Titus. So we can close this, and of course the other Gospels, have the same baptism event in it also. Now here's another cute one that the Roman Flavians provided us with. And this is a so here Jesus/Titus is saying, truly I say to you, it shall be more tolerable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah than for that town. That's for any town that doesn't receive supposedly these 12 Jesus sent out, or Titus sent out, go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans. So Titus didn't want these apostles or sent out ones, and they could be the speculatores or the exploratores. And he doesn't want them to go to the non-Jews, and he doesn't want them to go to the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. This is exactly what Titus was doing during his campaign, was he was making war with the Jews. And preach as you go, saying the kingdom of heaven is at hand. So in essence are saying, hey Jews, newsflash, Rome is here, and you're about to get some of the empire in your neighborhood. So then it says, do these miracles, cast out demons. That's a euphemism for getting rid of Jews. You received without pain, give without pay. Take no gold, nor silver, nor copper in your belts. So he's telling his soldiers not to loot. No bag for your journey, nor tunics, nor sandals, nor a staff, for the laborer deserves his food. Whatever town or village you enter, find out who is worthy in it, and stay with them until you depart. That's housing. That's being housed by locals. As you enter the house, salute it, or greet it. But here the translation says salute. And if the house is worthy, let your peace come upon it. So that's a soldier. So a soldier brings with him the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. And he's saying, let your peace come upon it, because if a soldier comes into your home, it's either bad news or it could be really good news, because your house is going to be safe if the soldier that is in it is on your side. But if the soldier's against you, it's bad news, of course. But if it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. So that's bad news for the house. And if any one will not receive you or listen to your words, shake off the dust from your feet as you leave that house or town. And this has been seen like some kind of Christian curse, like shaking the dust off your feet. But Roman soldiers, their feet used to get really dusty as they marched, right? Maybe shaking the dust off your feet means actually kicking someone until the dust flies off of your feet. Truly I say to you, it shall be more tolerable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah than for that town. And if you've read in Flavius Josephus what the Flavians did to these towns, what Vespasian and Titus did to these towns, you could kind of see where he's going with this. And then finally, behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. So as innocent or as harmless as doves. Is harmless is one translation, which is kind of a joke because Titus wasn't harmless, and he certainly wasn't innocent. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to councils and flog you in their synagogues, and you'll be dragged before governors and kings for my sake. So this is if the Jews were to get their hands on any of these Roman soldiers, that's some of the treatment they could expect to receive. So he's telling them to beware, be on the watch. So let's continue. Now here's another key passage having to do with doves or Titus. And Titus entered the temple of God, something that Titus Flavius actually did, and drove out all who sold and bought in the temple. He actually drove people out of the temple if he didn't outright kill them first. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons or doves. And there, in some of the other Gospels, it actually adds some other animals to the list. But this is in Matthew, and we can check Mark on this. But here in Matthew, it says only pigeons or doves. So here there are people in the temple selling pigeons or doves for sacrifice. And this bird is a literal translation of the name Titus. So if by extension Titus's soldiers are considered like deputy doves, or being descended from Titus, like he's their He's their army daddy, kind of. Um, then you might have a picture there of the Jews who fought Roman soldiers there in the courts of the temple. But personally, I think it's like a picture of, it's like more black comedy of Titus being pissed off because there are people who are slaughtering the very animal who represents him. You know, it's kind of a joke, a black joke, a dark joke, that is, dark humor. So, and then he says, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of robbers." And that word robber there, it's associated with, I believe, the Zealots, because there's some accusation going on that the Zealots were really bandits and robbers and blah blah blah. Robert Eisenman goes into that, I think, in his book, if I remember correctly. And but when the chief priests and the scribes saw the wonderful things that he did, and the children crying out in the temple, "Hosanna to the Son of David." By the way, David in Hebrew, that's Tet, Halom, or Vavwa Yud, no, Vavwa Halom. Like, the character looks the same except for the vowel pointing, but it's Tit. The name David is well, actually, I take that back. I think it's D-O-D, actually. But I'm getting a little confused there. It's D-O-D or D-U-D or D-V-D, but if those Hebrew characters were taken as Latin characters, then it would look like Tit, which of course would be like short for Titus. But anyway, so the chief priests and scribes, these would have been the people that would have been fighting the Roman soldiers when they were in the courts of the temple before the temple was burned down. And anyway, so we'll stop there. But so that's a passage where Jesus is getting ticked off because in the temple there are people who are selling doves for sacrifice. His namesake animal. So his spirit animal, if you will. So here in Mark, the baptism scene says, "And the Spirit descending upon him like a dove," the heavens were opened. So there it says like a dove, whereas in Matthew it says, descending like a dove. Let's see if Luke, and then Luke 32 or 3, chapter 3 verse 22 says, "The Holy Spirit descended upon him in bodily form as a dove. And a voice came from heaven saying, 'Thou art my beloved Son, with thee I am well pleased.'" Why am I back in the King James Version again? Unless that's just the honorific and they're sticking to the these and thous when when the divine voice speaks, I guess. I don't know. And John bore witness, "I saw the Spirit descend as a dove from heaven, and it remained on him." So the more you look at the different versions, the more clear it becomes that the dove is showing that Jesus is actually Titus. So here in John it adds oxen and sheep, to the animals being sold, and Mark just says pigeons, doesn't add any more animals. So we see that Mark having primacy, it's Mark being considered the earliest of the Gospels, it says only pigeons. So we see the original version of the story had them only selling pigeons. That was the big issue. And then Luke only mentions that they had to do what was said in the law, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. It doesn't even have the money changers scene in it. So, and that's the extent of it, I guess. John, and he told those who sold the pigeons, so now it's just pigeons again. 2 verses later. It's almost like oxen and sheep were added, because now 2 verses later in verse 16 the issue is pigeons again. Take these things away, you shall not make my father's house a house of trade. Interesting. It's almost like a glaring interpolation there. Isn't that the right word, interpolation, when you add words? Let me see. The insertion of something of a different nature into something else, right? An interpolation. Where was I? Back here. I'm curious, if I click on this and Bibles. No, I want this one. I want this version, Bibles. Oxen and sheep. Trying to see if there's a earlier manuscript that doesn't have oxen and sheep. I'm not seeing one. Well, one thing we could check maybe real quick is John 2:14 in the New World Translation. John 2:14, New World Translation. John 2:14. Nope, says cattle and sheep. So apparently it's there. The cattle and sheep are there even in the earliest Greek manuscript. So after making a whip of ropes, he drove out all those with sheep and cattle out of the temple. Oh, okay. So then he kicked out the sheep and cattle, and then he said to those selling the doves, "Take these things away from here." I guess he couldn't kick out the doves. Take these things away from here. Interesting how the doves are treated differently than the sheep and cattle. So it doesn't look like it was an interpolation. Looks like it's kind of like an embellishment of the story. Anyway, so and it's strange how John, who I think it was John who was the resistance fighter in the temple. So it's interesting that John has more details about the story. You have to wonder whether when the temple was being laid siege to, if they had oxen and sheep in the temple in order to feed themselves as they were being laid siege to. But I don't know, because Flavius Josephus says that there was pretty well starvation all throughout Jerusalem by that point, I think. So those are some passages about doves. what was I looking at here? Oh, that's just, let me go back again, back. Alright, so that covers the New Testament mentions of dove. So one is the baptism of Jesus, where you've got this mysterious sign of a dove. Sometimes it says it came down bodily in the like a dove or as a dove. And aside from like the dove being a symbol of peace, there's not really any really convincing explanation of why a dove was needed in that scene. But if the Roman Flavians are the ones who cooked up Christianity, then it's pretty clear that the passage is saying that the dove is letting you know that Jesus is Titus. So, now, let's see, that's Hebrew. Now in Greek, well first, in Hebrew, the Hebrew word for dove is Jonah. Now I want you to see something here. Here in definition number 2 of the Gesenius's Hebrew Chaldee lexicon, it notes that let's see, what does it say here? Yonim. So here it's just saying the plural of Jonah is Yonim, but it's saying dove. And then it says the second definition is Jonah, the prophet Jonah. But now, and that's because the Gesenius's lexicon doesn't have Strong's numbers for its words, right? So the spelling in Hebrew, going right to left, Yud, Holom, Nun, Hey, that word is used both for dove and for the name Jonah, and the vowel pointing is the same there. Now I'll show you that in the Strong's it's also the same, but the Strong's doesn't list the name Jonah or Yonah because there is no hard J sound in Hebrew. It doesn't list them the same as the same Strong's numbers. So this one is Hebrew 3123, and the name Jonah or Yonah is Hebrew 3124. But I want you to look here at, maybe I should blow it up a little bit for you. I want you to look here. Yud, starting from the right, going left. Holom, Nun, Hey. Now, watch when I click on the word for dove. And back again. And back. Watch right here. There is no change. They are the same word. Even the vowel pointings are the same. Sometimes you'll get different vowel pointings, but the vowel pointings aren't really that important in Hebrew. But unless, you're going with the Masoretic scribes, but the vowel pointings weren't there before the Masoretic scribes, as far as I know. There may have been some kind of vowel pointings in the Dead Sea Scrolls that I'm not aware of, but I think it's fairly well known that the vowel pointings were most, systematic in the work of the Masoretic scribes. And that's like the 5th century, I think. So they weren't there in the they weren't there in the Torah when it was originally written, right? Or in probably not even in the Tanakh when it was originally written, or in the book of Jonah when it was originally written. So anyway, these two are the same word, so we should consider them the same. So Jonah, it even acknowledges that the name Jonah means dove. So now what we do is we move on from the Hebrew to the Greek, and Ionos is how it's transliterated in Greek. And here it says Jonah or Jonas equals dove. At least they got that right. You know, they can't figure out that Titus means dove, but they certainly know that Jonah or Jonas means dove. And so now we'll go to occurrences of Jonas, and we get some very key, or at least one very key. We'll have to see if there are any more. One very key passage. Then some of the scribes and Pharisees said to him, Jesus / Titus, "Teacher, we wish to see a sign from you." But he answered them, "An evil and adulterous generation." And this word generation, I believe, refers to an ethnicity. He's not speaking about all the people who lived in the last 20 years. And I'll show you. And this is like how they whitewash some of what's being said here. This is a very racist thing being said. Generation, time, age, nation. That's what it's saying. But then look here. Outline of biblical usage. Fathered, birth, nativity. That which has been begotten, men of the same stock, a family, the several ranks of natural descent, the successive members of a genealogy. And then here in 3 it says the whole multitude of men living at the same time. Yeah, maybe in English that's what it means, but let's see. And then it says an age. Let's see, and then here again, beginning, birth, nativity, that which has been begotten, men of the same stock, the several ranks in a natural descent. Now, how can we check this out? You know, we want to make sure we get this right. And it's funny, like, look at this, Gehenna, Gehenna, it almost sounds like Gehenna. And so it comes from genos, which, what do we say? Genes. 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 What does that refer to? Does that refer to a period of time? Or does that refer to genetics? And what does this say? Kind. We know what a biblical kind is. That's the same species. Kind, kindred, offspring, nation, stock, barn, and then diversity one time, whatever. So we see that this word, it's referring to race. And then here it says from this word, ginomai. That's beginning to sound like it has to do with vagina, but maybe I'm wrong on that. Let's see. Be come to pass, be married, Sounds like, oh, so this is like having to do with Genesis. So, we see that this term refers to race. And then, let's go back to what he says. But Titus, Jesus, answered them, an evil and adulterous race seeks for a sign. So he's saying that the Jews are evil and adulterous, that they seek for a sign, right? Who are they? Scribes and Pharisees specifically, all of them Jews. The Sopharim, the scribes, and the Parushim are all Jews. He's saying that they are an evil and adulterous generation because they seek a sign. But no sign shall be given, it says to it, but some translations say no sign shall be given them except the sign of the prophet Jonah. And I think some of the passages says no sign except the sign of Jonah, but we'll have to check it out. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, or the land. The men of Nineveh will arise at the judgment with this race and condemn it, for they repented at the preaching of Jonah, or Titus, and behold, something greater than Jonah is here. So Jesus, Titus, is saying something greater than Jonah is here. He's saying that something greater than that prophet Jonah is here, and that's me, Titus, Yonah in Hebrew, dove. And then he says, the queen of the south will rise to the judgment with this race and condemn it, for she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, something greater than Solomon is here. So that's a key passage saying that that the sign that the Jews would receive would be the sign of Jonah, or the sign of Titus, namely Titus coming with his legions. And then it goes on to refer to like the destruction of, or potential destruction of Nineveh, which didn't happen. And then let's see, so that's seek a sign. Oh, that's right, I need to go back, don't I? So Jonas, so here it is. Yeah, Matthew 16 doesn't say sign of the prophet Jonah, it just says the sign of Jonah, or the sign of Titus. And then Luke agrees, no sign shall be given to it except the sign of Jonah, or Titus. And then Luke 30, for as Jonah, Titus became a sign to the men of Nineveh, so will the Son of Man be to this generation. So that's, Son of Man is just a like an expression apparently for Titus, because Titus is the son of Vespasian, a man. Luke 32, for they repented at the preaching of Jonah, behold, something greater than Jonah is here. So you're saying that like the Jews that were being besieged by Titus did not repent to Titus and essentially surrender Jerusalem to him. They just kept fighting him. That's what happened in the first century. So these are passages using the Greek word for the name Jonas rather than the Greek word for the animal dove, even though it agrees here that Jonah or Jonas means dove. Oh, and by the way, this is a stretch, admittedly, but look here, Iesous. This is the name for Jesus, and then Jonas, the similarity of these words. But, you know, I admit that that's a big stretch. Big stretch. So, I think this shows that there is something to the idea that Titus means dove, and we can see connections and explanations of enigmatic sayings of Jesus in the Christian scriptures, and enigmatic events like the baptism of Jesus that are explained by the fact that Titus is Jesus, and that Titus means dove, and that Jonah means dove. So Titus's name in Hebrew, translated, not transliterated, but translated literally, would have been Jonah, or Jonas, or Jonah, if you smack that hard J sound on it. So you got three terms: Titus, dove, and Jonah, or Jonas, or Jonah. And they all mean the same thing. They're all connected. And knowing this provides some explanation of some enigmatic passages in the Christian scriptures. So this is important to know moving forward as we discuss more passages where do these strange sayings of Jesus make more sense coming out of the mouth of this Roman general turned emperor, Titus Flavius, the man who destroyed the temple, or do they make more sense coming out of the man who is supposedly an itinerant Jewish rabbi, supposed Prince of Peace, of whom we have very little historical testimony, of whom we are provided very little background story. He just kind of pops up out of nowhere, almost like Titus did when he was assigned to this war campaign against Galilee and Judea. So I'll just end this video here. This is just a little bit of evidence in establishing the case.